My parents said it was just a joke when they left me stranded miles from home, but that was the day I stopped being their son, started building a life without them. Years later, when they came begging me for help, I gave them the exact same thing they once gave me. I used to think that no matter what happened in life, family would always be there for you. I thought that even if they made mistakes, deep down they'd care enough to protect you, to make you feel safe.
Oh.
But that was before I realized that not all families are built on love. Some are built on habits, on favoritism, on this unspoken hierarchy where some people matter more than others. And in my family, I was at the very bottom. I'm the older brother. My sister Emily is 3 years younger than me. You'd think being the firstborn meant I'd get some of that initial burst of parental pride, maybe a little extra attention while they figured out parenting. But the truth is, I can't remember a time when I was ever their priority. The moment Emily was born, she became the center of their universe, and I became the one expected to step aside. From the time she could walk, Emily was spoiled. If she wanted a toy, she got it. If she wanted the last piece of cake, it was hers. If she threw a tantrum, my parents bent over backwards to calm her down. When I got upset, I was told to stop being dramatic. Whenever there was a conflict between us, I already knew how it would play out. She'd cry, they'd comfort her, and I'd get blamed. They told me I was older and needed to set an example. That phrase became my personal prison. It meant my feelings didn't matter. It meant I could be punished for things I didn't even do, because keeping Emily happy was the top priority. Birthdays were the worst. I still remember my 12th birthday. I'd been excited all week, counting down the days.
Oh.
I woke up that morning hoping for something special.
I got a
Pair of socks? Emily, who had no reason for gifts, got a shiny new bike just because she's been doing so well in school. She was 8. I didn't complain out loud, but I guess my face gave me away. My mom narrowed her eyes and said, "Don't you dare sulk. You should be happy for your sister." So I learned to hide disappointment, to swallow it whole, and pretend it didn't matter. That became the pattern of my childhood, Emily getting the spotlight, me standing in the shadows. I convinced myself it was fine. I'd just work harder, study more, prove I was worth noticing. But no matter what I did, I never broke through that wall of indifference. The breaking point came when I was 17. It was summer break. And my parents decided we'd take a road trip. I actually let myself get a little excited about it. Figured maybe, just maybe, we'd have some good family time. We packed up the car early one morning and hit the highway. A few hours into the drive, my dad pulled into a gas station. He handed me a $5 bill and said, "Go grab us some snacks." It was a small, run-down station, the kind with buzzing fluorescent lights and dusty shelves. I picked out some chips, a couple of candy bars, and 2 sodas. I brought them to the counter, paid, and walked back outside. The parking lot was empty. At first, I thought maybe they'd just move the car to a different spot. I looked around, no car, no sign of them. My chest tightened. I scanned the road, thinking maybe they'd gone to a nearby diner. Nothing. I waited by the pumps, shifting from one foot to the other. 5 minutes turned into 10, then 30. I tried to call my mom's phone, no signal. The guy at the counter let me use the station phone. I called home, no answer. I left a message, asking where they were. I waited another hour before I finally got a text. It was from Emily. "Lo, Mom and Dad said you'll have to find your own way home. It's a joke." A joke. I stood there staring at the screen, feeling heat rise in my face. This wasn't a joke. I was stranded in the middle of nowhere with $5 in my pocket. No ride, no phone signal, and no idea how far I was from home. I ended up walking along the highway until I found a bus station in a small town. The bus took me part of the way, but I still had to walk several miles to get home. By the time I made it back, the sun was setting. My shoulders were sunburned, my legs ached, my stomach growled from having skipped lunch. When I walked in the door, they were all in the living room laughing. "Lighten up," my dad said. "We knew you'd be fine." I didn't laugh. I didn't even speak. Something inside me had snapped. It wasn't just anger. It was this cold realization that I could never count on them for anything. That night I lay awake in bed and decided I was done. Done chasing their approval. Done hoping they'd change. If I wanted a future worth having, I'd have to make it myself. A few months later, I graduated high school. While most of my classmates were celebrating with family dinners and parties, I packed a duffel bag with my clothes, a few books, and my old laptop. I found a tiny basement apartment through a friend from work and moved out quietly, without telling them exactly where I was going. I left a short note. I'll be fine. Don't wait up. Life on my own was hard. I worked 2 jobs, one at a grocery store, one delivering pizzas. My apartment was damp and smelled faintly of mildew, but it was mine. I taught myself new skills at night: web design, coding, marketing, anything that might help me climb out of minimum wage. There were nights when I was so tired I could barely keep my eyes open. Nights when I stared at the cracked ceiling and wondered if I'd made a mistake leaving. But every time doubt crept in, I remembered that gas station, that text message, the sound of their laughter when I walked through the door. That memory kept me going. By my mid-20s, things started to change. I launched a small online business, building websites for local companies. At first, it barely paid my bills. But I kept learning, kept improving, and slowly clients started referring me to others. Within a few years, I had a steady stream of work, a nice apartment, and my first real savings account. Eventually, I bought a modest house. I wasn't rich, but I was stable, independent, happy even. During those years, I didn't hear much from my family. Emily would send the occasional holiday texts. My parents never called. I told myself I didn't care, and for the most part, I didn't. I had friends who treated me better than my family ever had. I had a life I'd built from nothing, and I was proud of it. Then, one afternoon, I got a message from Emily. It said, "We need to talk. It's about Mom and Dad." I ignored it at first, but she sent another. "It's serious." We met at a coffee shop. She looked different. Tired, less polished than I remembered. She told me our parents were in trouble. They'd made bad investments, had mounting debts, and were dealing with medical bills they couldn't pay. She'd been helping them, but now she was struggling too. "They need you," she said. "We all need to stick together." Just stared at her. For years, I'd been invisible to them. Suddenly, I was useful. She told me they wanted to meet and talk. I agreed, partly out of curiosity. When I saw them, I barely recognized them. My dad looked older, his hair almost all gray. My mom's face was lined, her posture slouched. They tried to make small talk, asking about my computer thing, as they called it. Eventually, my dad cleared his throat and said, "We're family. We should help each other out. It's just until we get back on our feet." My mom nodded, avoiding my eyes. I listened, letting them lay out their situation. They needed money to cover overdue bills and avoid losing the house. Emily glanced at me hopefully. When they were done, I leaned forward and said, "Do you remember that time you left me at a gas station? You told me to find my own way home, said it was a joke." They shifted uncomfortably. My dad muttered, "We were young and stupid." My mom sighed. Emily looked down at her hands. I smiled. "Well, I found my own way in life. And now you'll have to find yours." I pulled out my wallet, took out a $5 bill, and placed it on the table, just like the one they'd given me that day. "That should get you started," I said. Then I stood up and walked out. They called after me, but I didn't look back. I walked to my car feeling lighter than I had in years. Not because I'd hurt them, because I'd finally closed the book on a chapter of my life that had been weighing me down. Some people say family is everything. Say family is the people who show up when you need them, who treat you with respect and kindness. Blood doesn't guarantee love. Sometimes walking away isn't losing, it's winning. I didn't just survive without them, I thrived. And in the end, I left them exactly where they left me, on their own. Stories like this aren't just entertainment. They're reminders that you have the right to walk away from people who don't value you. If you've ever been underestimated, ignored, or treated like you don't matter, remember, your comeback can be the sweetest revenge.
I thought I had the perfect marriage until I found my husband's phone buzzing with love messages. The sender broke my heart. It was my younger sister, and she was pregnant with his baby. What I did next at our family dinner destroyed both their lives and split our entire family apart forever. I thought I had the perfect marriage. My name is Rachel, and for 8 years, I believed my husband Tyler was my soulmate. We had 2 beautiful children, Lily, who's 6, and little Connor, who just turned 4. Tyler worked as a financial advisor, making good money while I stayed home to raise our kids. Everything seemed perfect from the outside. But perfection, as I learned the hard way, is often just an illusion waiting to shatter. It was a Tuesday morning in March when my world came crashing down. Tyler had left for work as usual, kissing me goodbye and telling me he'd be home late because of a client dinner. I was used to these late nights. They'd become more frequent over the past 6 months, but I trusted him completely. Why wouldn't I? He was my husband, the father of my children, the man who promised to love me forever. I was folding laundry in our bedroom when I heard his phone buzzing on the nightstand. He'd forgotten it, which was unusual because Tyler was practically glued to that thing. The screen lit up with a text message, and what I saw made my blood run cold. The message was from someone named Amanda, and it read, "Can't wait to see you tonight, baby. The hotel room is booked." My hands started shaking. There had to be an explanation. Maybe it was a work thing. Maybe Amanda was a colleague, and this was about a business meeting. But deep down, I knew. A wife always knows. I picked up his phone with trembling fingers. No password, which should have been my first red flag. I scrolled through their conversation, and each message was like a knife to my heart. They'd been having an affair for 6 months. 6 months of lies, 6 months of him coming home to me and our children after being with another woman. The messages were explicit, romantic, everything that our marriage had stopped being years ago. But the worst part, the part that made me physically sick, was when I saw her name in his contacts with a heart emoji. Amanda was my younger sister. My own sister, who came to our family dinners every Sunday, who played with my children, who I confided in about my marriage troubles. She knew everything about our relationship, our problems, our most intimate secrets, and she used that knowledge to steal my husband. The irony was bitter. Our family had always been complicated. My parents, Helen and Robert, had always favored Amanda because she was the baby, the pretty one, the one who could do no wrong in their eyes. When we were growing up, I was the responsible one, the one who got good grades and followed the rules, while Amanda was the wild child who got away with everything. Even as adults, nothing had changed. When Amanda dropped out of college to become a yoga instructor, my parents supported her decision and helped pay her rent. When I got pregnant, with Lily right after college, they lectured me about being too young and not focusing on my career. When Tyler and I bought our first house, my parents barely acknowledged it. When Amanda got her yoga certification, they threw her a party and invited the whole extended family. I sat on our bed, the bed where Tyler and I had made love countless times, where we'd planned our future, where I'd nursed both our babies, and I felt my entire world collapse. 8 years of marriage, 10 years of being together, thrown away from my 24-year-old sister who worked as a yoga instructor and had always been the pretty one, the fun one, the one everyone loved. I called in sick to my part-time job at the local bookstore and spent the day going through Tyler's things. I found hotel receipts hidden in his wallet, charges on our credit card that I'd never questioned because I trusted him. Dinners at expensive restaurants on nights he said he was working late, a jewelry store receipt for a necklace I'd never seen. He was buying her gifts with our money that should have gone toward our children's future. When Tyler came home, that evening, I was sitting at our kitchen table with all the evidence spread out in front of me. His phone, the receipts, printed screenshots of their messages. He walked in with a smile, asking about my day, and then he saw his phone in my hands. The color drained from his face. "Rachel, I can explain," he said, but I held up my hand to stop him. "Explain what, Tyler? Explain how you've been sleeping with my sister for 6 months? Explain how you've been lying to me every single day? Explain how you've been spending our children's college fund on hotel rooms and jewelry for Amanda?" He tried to sit down, tried to reach for my hand, but I pulled away. It just happened, Rachel. We didn't plan it. You and we've grown apart. We barely talk anymore. We never have time for each other. Amanda understands me in a way you don't. Those words cut deeper than any knife could. I'd been home raising his children, keeping his house, supporting his career, and he was complaining that I didn't understand him. Where is she now? I asked. Who? Don't play dumb, Tyler. Where is Amanda? Does she know I found out? He looked down at his hands. She's at her apartment. And yes, I texted her when I saw my phone was missing. Of course he did. Of course his first thought was to warn her, not to think about how this would devastate me or our children. That night, I made him sleep in the guest room while I lay awake planning my next move. I could confront Amanda, scream at her, make a scene, but that wouldn't accomplish anything. I could file for divorce immediately, but I wanted to be smart about this. I wanted them both to pay for what they'd done to me and my family. But first, I needed to know if our families knew. The next morning, after Tyler left for work, I called my mother. Hi, Mom. I was wondering if you've talked to Amanda lately? Oh, yes, dear. We had lunch yesterday. She seems so happy lately, glowing even. I think she might have met someone special. My heart sank. My own mother was gushing about Amanda's happiness, not knowing it was built on the destruction of my marriage. Did she say anything about who it might be? I asked carefully. Well, she was being secretive about it, but she did mention he's older, established, has children. I told her I hoped he treats her better than those boys her age she usually dates. I hung up feeling sick. My mother was practically celebrating my sister's affair with my husband. I drove to Amanda's apartment that afternoon. She lived in a trendy complex downtown that our parents helped pay for because she could never hold down a steady job. I had a key because I'd been helping her with her rent when she was short on money, which happened more often than I care to admit. Our parents always expected me to take care of Amanda, to be the responsible big sister who cleaned up her messes. She wasn't home, probably at one of her yoga classes, so I let myself in. Her apartment was a mess, but I wasn't there to judge her housekeeping. I was there to gather evidence. I found more proof of their affair, love letters Tyler had written her, photos of them together that made me sick to look at. But the most devastating discovery was a pregnancy test box in her bathroom trash. It was positive. My sister was pregnant with my husband's baby. I sat on her bathroom floor and cried until I had no tears left. Then I got angry. Angrier than I'd ever been in my life. They hadn't just betrayed me, they'd created a life together while destroying mine. But as I sat there, a plan began to form in my mind. If they wanted to destroy my life, I was going to make sure they destroyed each other's too. And I was going to make sure our families saw exactly what kind of people they really were. I took photos of everything, including the pregnancy test, and then I left. Over the next few weeks, I played the perfect wife and daughter. I didn't let on that I knew about the baby. I smiled when Tyler came home, cooked his favorite meals, even initiated intimacy a few times to keep him from getting suspicious. I attended every family dinner, watched Amanda laugh and joke with Tyler while our parents doted on her, watched my children play with their aunt who was carrying their half-sibling. Meanwhile, I was documenting everything. Every late night, every lie, every charge on our credit cards. I hired a private investigator with money from my secret savings account that Tyler didn't know about. I'd been putting aside small amounts, for years, money from my part-time job, thinking it would be a nice surprise someday for a vacation or home renovation. Instead, it became my escape fund. The private investigator, a woman named Linda who specialized in cheating spouses, got me everything I needed. Photos, videos, financial records showing how Tyler had been spending our money on his affair. She even discovered that Amanda had been bragging about the affair to her friends, talking about how she was going to steal Tyler away from his boring sister and live the life she deserved. But the most shocking discovery was that my parents already suspected something. Linda found out through a mutual family friend that my mother had seen Amanda and Tyler together at a restaurant downtown. Instead of telling me, she'd chosen to keep quiet, probably hoping it would just go away. My own mother was protecting Amanda's affair instead of her daughter's marriage. 3 weeks after I discovered the affair, I put my plan into motion. It was Sunday, family dinner night at my parents' house. Tyler, the kids, and I arrived first, followed by Amanda, who was glowing with her secret pregnancy. My parents, Helen and Robert, were their usual selves, fawning over Amanda and barely acknowledging my presence. "Amanda, darling, you look radiant," my mother said, hugging her tightly. "Doesn't she look wonderful, Rachel?" "She certainly looks different," I said with a smile that didn't reach my eyes. During dinner, I watched Tyler and Amanda carefully, avoid eye contact while my parents chattered about family news. My brother Kevin and his wife Lisa were there with their teenage daughter Morgan, who was home from boarding school. The whole family together, one big happy lie. After we finished eating, I stood up and cleared my throat. "Actually, before we have dessert, I have something I need to share with everyone." Tyler looked nervous. Amanda went pale, but my parents just smiled expectantly. "Tyler and I have some news," I said, pulling out my phone. "We've been keeping a secret for 6 months now." I showed them the first photo, Tyler and Amanda kissing outside a hotel. The silence was deafening. "What is this?" my father demanded. "This is Tyler having an affair with Amanda," I said calmly. "For 6 months. While I've been home raising our children, my husband has been sleeping with my sister." My mother's face went white. "Rachel, there must be some mistake." "No mistake." "Mom," I said, showing more photos. "Here they are at dinner last Tuesday when Tyler told me he was working late. Here's the jewelry receipt for the necklace he bought her with our children's college fund. And here," I showed the photo of the pregnancy test, "is proof that Amanda is carrying Tyler's baby." Amanda burst into tears. Tyler stood up so fast he knocked over his chair. My brother Kevin started yelling at both of them. My sister-in-law Lisa grabbed their daughter and left the room. It was chaos. "How could you do this to your own sister?" my father shouted at Amanda. "How could you destroy Rachel's family?" But my mother's reaction was what hurt the most. Instead of comforting me, she turned to Amanda. "Oh, sweetheart, why didn't you tell us? We could have helped you figure this out." "Helped her figure this out?" I said incredulously. "Mom, she's been having an affair with my husband. She's pregnant with his baby while I've been raising his other children. These things happen, Rachel," my mother said. "Maybe if you and Tyler had been happier, this wouldn't have occurred. Amanda didn't mean to fall in love." That was the moment I realized that even faced with undeniable proof, my mother would still choose Amanda over me. Even when Amanda had destroyed my marriage and my family, she was still the golden child who could do no wrong. Tyler tried to salvage the situation. "Look, everyone, Rachel and I have been having problems for years. Amanda and I, we just connected. We didn't mean for anyone to get hurt." "You didn't mean for anyone to get hurt?" Kevin shouted. "You destroyed your family. You destroyed Rachel." "Rachel will be fine," Tyler said dismissively. "She's strong. She'll land on her feet, and the kids will adjust." The casual way he dismissed our children's well-being, dismissed 8 years of marriage, was breathtaking in its cruelty. Amanda was sobbing. "I never meant for it to happen this way. I love him, Rachel. I really love him." "You love him so much that you lied to everyone for 6 months?" I asked. "You love him so much that you helped him steal money from his children? You love him so much that you destroyed 2 families?" "It's not like that," she cried. "We want to be together. We want to raise this baby together. We can all figure out how to make this work." That's when Tyler turned to her with fury in his eyes. "What baby?" he demanded. "You said you were on birth control. You promised me this wouldn't happen." Amanda looked shocked. "I am on birth control. This wasn't planned." "Do you have any idea what this means?" Tyler shouted, not caring that our whole family was watching. "Rachel's going to take me for everything in the divorce. I'll lose my house, my kids, half my income. I can't afford another child." And there it was, the truth about what kind of man I'd married. He wasn't concerned about hurting me or our children. He was worried about his money and his comfortable life. Amanda looked devastated. "I thought you loved me. I thought you wanted a future with me." "I wanted to have fun with you," Tyler yelled. "I never said anything about leaving Rachel and starting a family. This ruins everything." My father stepped between them. "Both of you get out of my house. Now." Daddy, please, Amanda begged, but he shook his head. You're not the daughter I raised. Get out. Tyler grabbed his keys. Come on, Amanda. Let's go figure this out. But Amanda was looking around the room at all of us, finally seeing the destruction she'd caused. I can't, she whispered. I can't do this anymore. She ran out of the house, leaving Tyler standing there alone. He looked at me one last time. Rachel, we need to talk about this like adults. No, I said, handing him the divorce papers I'd brought with me. We need to talk through lawyers. You're being served. Over the next few months, the divorce proceedings were brutal but satisfying. Thanks to all the evidence I'd gathered, I was awarded the house, primary custody of the children, and a very generous alimony and child support arrangement. Tyler had to sell his classic car collection and take out loans to pay the settlement. The family fallout was just as dramatic. My brother Kevin and his family completely cut ties with Amanda. They wouldn't let their daughter Morgan have any contact with her aunt. My father was devastated by Amanda's betrayal and refused to speak to her for months. But my mother continued to support Amanda, which created a rift between my parents that lasted for over a year. They went to couples counseling, but my father couldn't understand how his wife could continue to enable the daughter who'd destroyed their other daughter's life. Amanda, meanwhile, was dealing with her own consequences. Word got out about the affair, and her yoga studio fired her when clients started complaining. Small-town gossip travels fast, and nobody wanted to take classes from someone who'd betrayed her own sister. Her friends abandoned her when they realized what she'd done. She couldn't afford her trendy apartment anymore and had to move back, in with our parents, but the tension in the house was unbearable. My father could barely look at her, and my mother's attempts to normalize the situation just made everyone more uncomfortable. Tyler had made it clear he wanted nothing to do with the baby, and Amanda couldn't afford a lawyer to go after him for child support on top of what he was already paying me. The pregnancy was difficult, and she was alone for most of it. Our extended family, aunts, uncles, cousins, all took sides. Most of them supported me, which meant Amanda was uninvited from family gatherings, holidays, celebrations. She became a pariah in her own family. But the real karma came 6 months later. I was at the grocery store with Lily and Connor when I ran into Amanda. She was visibly pregnant now, working as a cashier at the store because it was the only job she could find that would hire her. She looked tired, older, broken in a way that had nothing to do with pregnancy. Rachel, she said when she saw me, her voice barely a whisper. How are you? I looked at her, this woman who used to be my sister, who I used to love and trust, and I felt nothing but pity. I'm doing very well, actually, I said honestly. The kids and I are happy. We're moving to a bigger house next month. Her eyes filled with tears. I heard Dad's not speaking to Mom anymore because of me. It was true. My parents had separated 3 months earlier. My father couldn't forgive my mother for continuing to support Amanda after what she'd done. The whole family was fractured because of their affair. I'm sorry, Amanda said. I'm so sorry for everything. I know it doesn't mean anything now, but I never meant for it to destroy the whole family. No, I said. You never thought about the consequences at all. There's a difference. I paid for my groceries and left her standing there, crying behind the cash register. As for Tyler, the last I heard he was living in a studio apartment across town, drowning in debt and barely scraping by after paying child support and alimony. He'd tried to date other women, but word about the affair and how he'd treated his pregnant girlfriend had gotten around. Turns out women don't want to date men who abandon pregnant women and destroy their families. I found out through Kevin that Tyler had tried to reconcile with Amanda after the baby was born, probably realizing that having someone else help with bills would be beneficial, but she wanted nothing to do with him. She'd learned the hard way what kind of man he really was. A year after the divorce was finalized, I met James at a bookstore where I'd started working full-time. He was a widowed father of one, kind and patient and everything Tyler had never been. We took things slowly, both of us having been hurt before, but eventually he moved in with me and the kids. Lily and Connor adored him, and he treated them like his own children. Even my father approved of James, which meant a lot to me. My parents had gotten back together after a year of separation and counseling, but their relationship was never quite the same. My mother had learned some hard lessons about enabling, and my father had learned to be more vocal about his expectations for his family. We got married 2 years later in a small ceremony with just our closest friends and family. Amanda wasn't invited, obviously. She'd given birth to a daughter she named Emma, and from what I heard through family gossip, she was struggling as a single mother. Tyler was too busy working his second job to pay his debts to concern himself with his ex-wife's happiness or his other daughter's well-being. James adopted Lily and Connor after we got married, and Tyler signed away his parental rights willingly, probably relieved to not have to pay child support anymore. The kids barely remembered him now. They called James Dad, and he was the one, teaching them to ride bikes and helping with homework and tucking them in at night. 3 years after the divorce at Lily's school graduation, I saw Amanda again. She was there with her daughter Emma, who must have been about 2 years old. The little girl had Tyler's eyes and nose, which was unsettling, but she seemed happy and well cared for. Amanda looked better than she had at the grocery store, more put together, like she'd found some stability. After the ceremony, she approached me hesitantly. My parents were there, standing awkwardly between us, the family dynamic still strained after all these years. "Rachel, could I talk to you for just a minute?" I looked at James, who squeezed my hand supportively and took the kids to get some refreshments so I could have privacy. My parents watched nervously from a distance. "What do you need, Amanda?" I asked, not unkindly, but not warmly either. "I wanted to thank you," she said, which wasn't what I expected. "Thank me?" "For not fighting me for custody of Emma when Tyler wanted to sign away his rights. You could have made things much harder for me. You could have provided evidence that would have made the court question my fitness as a mother, but you didn't." She was right. I could have. I'd had plenty of evidence of her drinking during early pregnancy, her financial instability, her history of poor decisions, but I hadn't used it. "That little girl didn't choose to be born into this mess," I said. "She deserves a mother who loves her, even if I don't agree with the choices that mother made." Amanda nodded, tears in her eyes. "I've been going to therapy," she said. "Trying to understand why I did what I did, how I could hurt you like that, how I could hurt our whole family. I know I'll never be able to make it right, but I want you to know that I think about it every day. I live with the guilt every day." "Good," I said, and I meant it. Not because I wanted her to suffer, but because guilt meant she understood the magnitude of what she'd done. It meant she'd grown as a person. "I hope someday you can forgive me," she said. "I hope someday our family can heal." I looked at this woman who used to be my sister, who I used to love more than anyone except my own children. I glanced back at my parents, who were watching us hopefully, probably praying for some kind of reconciliation. "I have forgiven you, Amanda," I said finally. "But forgiveness doesn't mean forgetting, and it doesn't mean trusting you again. It just means I've let go of the anger because carrying it was hurting me more than it was hurting you. As for our family healing, that's something you'll have to work out with everyone individually. I can't speak for Dad's feelings, or Kevin's, or anyone else's." She nodded, understanding that this was as much closure as we would ever have. "Take care of your daughter," I said. "Make better choices for her sake." As I walked away to rejoin my family, my real family, I felt the last weight of that old life lifting off my shoulders. I'd built something beautiful from the ashes of my marriage, something stronger and more authentic than what Tyler and I had ever had. Lily ran up to me, chattering excitedly about her graduation, and James put his arm around my shoulders. This was my life now. A life built on honesty, respect, and real love. A life where I was valued and cherished, not taken for granted or betrayed. The family drama had been painful for everyone involved. My parents' marriage had been tested. My brother's family had been forced to choose sides. Extended family relationships had been damaged. But in a strange way, it had also shown me who truly cared about me and who would stand by me when things got difficult. Sometimes the worst thing that happens to you turns out to be the best thing that could have happened to you. Not because the pain wasn't real or because the betrayal didn't matter, but because it forces you to rebuild your life on a stronger foundation. It shows you what you're truly capable of surviving and overcoming. Tyler and Amanda taught me that I deserve better than settling for crumbs of affection and respect. They taught me that I was stronger than I ever imagined. And in the end, their betrayal led me to James, to real happiness, to a life I never could have imagined when I was married to Tyler. As I tucked Lily and Connor into bed that night, reading them their favorite story while James cleaned up the kitchen downstairs, I realized that I wouldn't change anything about my story. Every painful moment, every sleepless night, every tear I cried had led me here, to this perfect ordinary evening, with my family, the family I chose and who chose me back. That's the thing about betrayal and karma in families. It doesn't just affect the people directly involved, it ripples out and touches everyone. Parents have to choose between their children, siblings have to take sides, extended family has to navigate divided loyalties. Tyler and Amanda didn't just destroy my marriage, they fractured an entire family system. But families can heal, slowly, and with a lot of work. My parents learned to communicate better, to not play favorites, to hold their children accountable for their actions. Kevin and his family remained loyal to me, which strengthened our sibling bond. Even some of our extended family relationships grew stronger because people had to decide what their values were and act on them. Their punishment wasn't some dramatic downfall, it was simply living with the consequences of their choices while watching me thrive, despite everything they'd done to break me. Tyler lost his children, his home, his financial security, and his standing in the community. Amanda lost her family relationships, her career, her support system, and had to raise a child alone while dealing with the judgment of everyone who knew what she'd done. And that, I realized, was the most satisfying revenge of all. Not because I'd actively sought to hurt them, but because I'd refused to let their betrayal define my worth or limit my future. I'd taken their worst and turned it into my best. I'd taken their ending and made it my beginning. My name is Sarah, and I thought I had the perfect marriage. For 12 years, I believed my husband Mark was everything a woman could want, loving, successful, and devoted to our children. But on one rainy Tuesday evening, a single phone call shattered everything I thought I knew about the man sleeping next to me every night. This is the story of how my perfect life became my perfect nightmare, and how I got the ultimate revenge. Let me paint you a picture of what I thought my life was. My husband Mark and I lived in a beautiful suburban home with our 2 children, Emma, who was 9 at the time, and Jake, who was 7. Mark was a successful architect with his own firm, and I ran an online boutique that I'd built from scratch. From the outside, we were the perfect family. Mark was the kind of husband that made other women jealous. Every Friday without fail, he'd come home with fresh flowers, always my favorite white roses. He never missed a single one of Emma's dance recitals or Jake's soccer games. Even after 12 years of marriage, he still kissed me goodbye every morning like we were newlyweds. I remember thinking how lucky I was. My friends would constantly tell me, "Sarah, you hit the jackpot with Mark," and I believed them. I really did. Mark was romantic in all the little ways that mattered. He'd leave sweet notes in my coffee mug. He remembered every anniversary, every birthday, every special moment. When I was sick, he'd bring me soup and rub my back. When I was stressed about my business, he'd listen for hours and give me the best advice. Our social media was a highlight reel of happiness, family vacations, date nights, cozy evenings at home. Friends would comment things like relationship goals and, "You two are perfect together." I was so proud to be Mrs. Mark Williams. I'd introduce myself that way at social events, beaming with pride. This man had chosen me, loved me, built a life with me. I felt like the luckiest woman in the world. But looking back now, I realize I was living in a carefully constructed fantasy. And the man orchestrating it all was a master manipulator. The changes started about 6 months before everything fell apart, but they were so subtle that I almost didn't notice them. And when I did, Mark always had the perfect explanation. It began with the late nights. Mark had always been dedicated to his work, but suddenly he was staying at the office until 10, sometimes 11 p.m. When I'd call to check on him, he'd sound rushed, distracted. "Sorry, honey, big project deadline," he'd say. "You know how it is." And I did know how it was. Mark's architectural firm was successful because he was a perfectionist, so I didn't question it. Then there were the phone calls. Mark would be laughing and talking, but the moment I walked into the room, his voice would change. He'd wrap up quickly with a professional, "Let's discuss this tomorrow in the office." When I asked who he was talking to, it was always the same. Answer: Jessica, my business partner. You know how demanding clients can be. I knew Jessica. She'd joined Mark's firm about a year earlier, young, ambitious, fresh out of graduate school. Mark had mentioned how talented she was, how she brought fresh ideas to the company. I'd even met her a few times at office parties. She seemed nice. Enough. Though I noticed she always wore expensive designer clothes that seemed beyond what a junior architect should be able to afford. The credit card statements were next. Mark had always handled our finances. He was better with numbers, and I trusted him completely. But I started noticing him quickly shuffling through the mail, tucking away statements before I could see them. Just boring business expenses, he'd say when I asked. Nothing you need to worry about, sweetheart. There was also the cologne. For 12 years, Mark had worn the same cologne, the one I'd bought him for our first anniversary. It was our scent, but suddenly he smelled different. When I commented on it, he laughed it off. Oh, that? Jessica gave it to me for closing. The Henderson project. You know how she is with gifts. The worst part was how I started to doubt myself. When I'd express concerns, Mark would look at me with such genuine confusion and hurt. "Sarah, baby, what's gotten into you lately?" he'd say, pulling me close. "You're starting to sound paranoid. You know I love you more than anything in this world." And then he'd do something sweet. Bring me my favorite coffee, plan a surprise date night, or spend extra time with the kids. I'd feel guilty for doubting him. This was Mark, my Mark. The man who'd held my hand through my mother's funeral, who'd stayed up all night when the kids were sick, who still looked at me like I was the most beautiful woman in the world. So I pushed down my doubts. I told myself I was being silly, insecure for no reason. After all, what did I have to complain about? I had a loving husband, beautiful children, and a comfortable life. But deep down, something felt wrong. I just couldn't put my finger on what it was. Tuesday, October 15th. I remember the date because it's burned into my memory forever. It was raining that evening. One of those cold, dreary October rains that makes you want to stay inside with a cup of tea. I was in the living room, folding laundry while watching one of my favorite shows. Emma and Jake were upstairs doing homework. Mark had called earlier to say he'd be working late again, another client meeting with Jessica. That's when I heard it. Mark's phone, charging on the kitchen counter, buzzed with a text message. Normally, I wouldn't have thought twice about it, but something made me look. The preview on his lock screen showed just enough to make my blood run cold. "Can't wait to see you tonight, baby. Room 412 like always. I have something special planned. Jessica." I stood there, holding one of Mark's shirts, staring at that message. My hand started shaking so badly I dropped the shirt. My heart was pounding so hard I could hear it in my ears. Room 412, like always. Baby. I knew Mark's passcode. It was our wedding anniversary, 0923. He'd never hidden it from me. In 12 years of marriage, I'd never once gone through his phone. I trusted him completely. But I picked up that phone, and I entered that code, and I opened his messages with Jessica. What I found destroyed my entire world in a matter of minutes. Months and months of messages. Not just flirting. Detailed, explicit conversations about their feelings for each other, their plans, their intimate moments. Photos that made me physically sick. Hotel receipts forwarded to his email. Calendar appointments, disguised as client meetings. But the worst part? The lies were so elaborate, so detailed, so carefully planned. I scrolled back to the beginning. It had started 8 months ago. 8 months of "I love you" messages while he was kissing me goodbye each morning. 8 months of planning secret getaways while he was buying me flowers every Friday, and then I found the message that broke me completely. From 3 weeks earlier. "Can't wait to tell Sarah about the baby. I know it's going to be hard, but we've talked about this. It's time to end my marriage. I want to be with you and our child." Jessica was pregnant with my husband's baby. and they'd been planning to destroy my family for months. I kept reading, even though every message was like a knife to my heart. They'd already looked at apartments together. Mark had opened a secret bank account. They'd even discussed how to handle custody of Emma and Jake. The man who'd held me while I cried about my infertility struggles 3 years ago had gotten another woman pregnant. The man who'd promised me just last month that we were soulmates had been planning to leave me for almost a year. Every kiss, every I love you, every romantic gesture had been a lie while he built a new life with someone else. I sat on my kitchen floor, surrounded by the laundry I'd been folding, and cried harder than I'd ever cried in my life. I don't know how long I sat there crying, but eventually, something inside me shifted from heartbreak to fury. I wasn't going to be the victim in this story. If Mark wanted to destroy our family, he was going to pay for it. I took screenshots of everything. Every message, every photo, every receipt. I forwarded them all to my personal email and saved them in multiple places. Then I put his phone back exactly where I'd found it and continued folding laundry like nothing had happened. The next few hours were the longest of my life. I had to act normal when the kids came downstairs for dinner. I had to smile and help Jake with his math homework. I had to tuck Emma in and read her a bedtime story, all while my heart was breaking into a million pieces. But I was also planning. Called my friend Lisa, who'd gone through a messy divorce 2 years earlier. Without going into details, I asked for her lawyer's number. Then I researched everything I could about divorce law in our state, asset protection, and custody rights. I wasn't going to confront Mark and give him a chance to spin this or manipulate me. I'd seen how good he was at lying. Instead, I was going to be smart about this. The next morning, I acted completely normal. I made Mark his favorite breakfast, kissed him goodbye, and told him I loved him. He looked into my eyes and said, "I love you too, sweetheart. Have a beautiful day." The moment his car pulled out of the driveway, I called that lawyer. Attorney Margaret Chen was a shark in a business suit, and she was exactly what I needed. When I showed her the evidence I'd gathered, her eyes lit up. "Sarah," she said, "this is going to be one of the easiest divorce cases I've ever handled. Your husband just handed you everything you need." We spent the next 2 days preparing. Margaret helped me secure our joint accounts, gather financial records, and document everything. She also recommended a private investigator to gather additional evidence, because apparently there's always more than you think. The private investigator, Robert, was worth every penny. Within 48 hours, he discovered that Mark and Jessica had been meeting at that hotel twice a week for 6 months. He had photos, credit card records, even security footage from the hotel lobby. But Robert found something else. Something that would make this divorce much more interesting. Mark hadn't just been cheating. He'd been stealing. For the past 2 years, Mark had been skimming money from his architectural firm's accounts to fund his affair. Small amounts at first, but it had escalated to tens of thousands of dollars. Money that was being spent on jewelry for Jessica, their secret apartment deposit, expensive dinners, and weekend getaways. Margaret smiled when Robert presented his findings. "Sarah, your husband isn't just an adulterer. He's a criminal. And that changes everything." I decided to confront Mark on a Friday night, the night he always brought me flowers. I wanted the irony to be perfect. I'd packed his belongings earlier that day while he was at work. Everything was in suitcases by the front door. I'd also prepared copies of all the evidence, neatly organized in folders. Emma and Jake were at my sister's house for a sleepover. I didn't want them to witness what was about to happen. Mark walked through our front door at 6:30 p.m., white roses in hand, just like every Friday for 12 years. "Hi, honey, I'm home," he called out cheerfully. "I'm in the living room," I replied. He walked in with that same loving smile he'd given me every day of our marriage. The smile I now knew was a complete lie. "Beautiful flowers for my beautiful wife," he said, leaning down to kiss me. I didn't move away. I let him kiss me. Then I looked, him straight in the eyes. "How long have you been sleeping with Jessica?" The change in Mark's face was instant. The color drained completely. The flowers fell from his hands onto our coffee table. What are you talking about?" he stammered. I picked up the first folder and handed it to him. "Room 412, like always." Remember? Mark opened the folder and saw the screenshots of his messages. His hand started shaking just like mine had 3 days earlier. Sarah, I can explain. 8 months, I interrupted. 8 months of lying to my face. 8 months of kissing me goodbye while you planned to destroy our family. 8 months of playing the perfect husband while you got another woman pregnant. Tears started then. Mark's tears, not mine. I was done crying. Please, Sarah, you don't understand. It just happened. I never meant for it to go this far. I love you. I've always loved you. Jessica means nothing to me. I handed him the second folder, the one with their apartment lease and the ultrasound photo he'd saved in his favorites. Really? Because according to these messages, you've been planning to leave me for months. You've already signed a lease together. You've talked about baby names. Mark dropped to his knees, literally begging. I was confused. I was having a midlife crisis. It meant nothing. I'll end it right now, I swear. We can work through this. But I wasn't done. I handed him the third folder, the financial records Robert had uncovered. And what about the money you stole from your own company to pay? For your affair? Was that meaningless too? Mark's face went from pleading to panicked. He knew he was caught. I was going to pay it back, he whispered. With what money? The money you were planning to hide from me in the divorce? I stood up and walked to the front door where his suitcases were waiting. Get out, Mark. Your lawyer will be hearing from mine on Monday. And Mark? He looked up at me from where he was still kneeling on our living room floor. Don't ever come back to this house unless it's to pick up Emma and Jake for your supervised visits. If you're lucky enough to get any. The next 18 months were the darkest period of my life. Mark didn't go quietly. Instead, he fought me on everything. The house, custody, even my business assets. His strategy was to paint me as an unstable, paranoid wife who'd driven him away with my jealousy and controlling behavior. He claimed I'd hacked his phone illegally, violated his privacy, and was trying to destroy his reputation out of spite. Some people believed him. Mark was charming, well-respected in our community. He'd been the perfect husband and father in public for 12 years. It was easier for some people to believe that I'd lost my mind than to accept that Mark was capable of such deception. I lost friends. People I'd considered close friends suddenly became distant. At Emma's school events, some of the other parents would whisper when they saw me. I heard rumors that I'd been having an affair, that I'd forced Mark out over nothing, that I was bitter and vindictive. The worst part was watching my children suffer. Emma, who was 10 by then, was angry and confused. She blamed me for Daddy moving out. She didn't understand why our family had fallen apart, and Mark was careful to play the victim when he was with the kids. Mommy made Daddy leave, Emma told me one night through tears. Daddy says you won't let him come home. Jake, only 8, cried himself to sleep most nights, asking when Daddy was coming back. He kept his favorite picture of Mark by his bed and would kiss it goodnight. My business suffered too. I was so emotionally drained and distracted by legal battles that I couldn't focus on work. Orders were delayed, customer service suffered, and my income dropped by more than half just when I needed money most for legal fees. I had to sell our beautiful house, the home where I'd raised my children, where I'd thought we were happy. Mark fought me on the sale price, claiming I was being vindictive by not accepting his lowball offers. We moved into a small 2-bedroom apartment across town. Emma had to switch schools. Jake had to leave his soccer team. Everything familiar and stable in their lives was gone. And in their eyes, it was all my fault. The legal fees were crushing me. Margaret was worth every penny, but divorce lawyers aren't cheap, especially when your ex-husband is determined to make everything as difficult as possible. Meanwhile, Mark was playing house with Jessica and their new baby boy. He'd post photos on social media of their perfect little family, their beautiful apartment, their romantic date nights. The same romantic gestures he'd once reserved for me were now being lavished on her. Some nights, I'd lie awake wondering if I'd made a mistake. Maybe I should have tried to work it out. Maybe I should have accepted his apologies and tried to rebuild our marriage. Maybe I'd destroyed my children's lives over something that could have been forgiven. But then I'd remember the messages, the planning, the baby, the stolen money. This wasn't a moment of weakness or a midlife crisis. This was a calculated betrayal that had been going on for months. Still, there were moments when I felt like I was drowning. Everything changed with a phone call on a Wednesday morning in March. I was having coffee in my tiny apartment kitchen, trying to summon the energy to deal with another day of my shattered life, when an unknown number called. "Is this Sarah Williams?" A woman's voice asked. "Yes, who is this?" "My name is Rachel Martinez. I work at your ex-husband's architectural firm. I think there are some things you should know." Rachel, it turned out, was the firm's new financial manager. She'd been hired to modernize their accounting systems and had noticed some irregularities in the books. When she started digging deeper, she found evidence of systematic embezzlement going back almost 3 years, but Rachel wasn't just calling to report Mark's crimes. She had her own story to tell. "Sarah, I don't know how to tell you this, but Mark has been telling people at the PAM office that you were the one having an affair. He's been playing the victim, saying you became paranoid and abusive, that you destroyed the marriage over your own guilty conscience." My blood started boiling. Even after everything, Mark was still lying, still manipulating people to make himself look like the victim. "But here's the thing," Rachel continued. "I've been going through 3 years of financial records, and I can prove exactly when Mark started stealing money. It coincides perfectly with when his affair with Jessica began. He's been funding their entire relationship with embezzled funds." Rachel had found evidence that Mark had stolen over $180,000 from his own company. Money that should have gone to employees, contractors, and business expenses had been diverted to pay for hotel rooms, jewelry, the security deposit on the apartment he shared with Jessica, and even Jessica's maternity clothes and baby furniture. "I've already contacted the police and the FBI," Rachel said, "but I thought you should know before this becomes public. Your divorce case is about to get very interesting." She was right. Within a week, Mark was arrested at his office in front of all his colleagues. The local newspaper ran the story with the headline, "Prominent Architect Arrested for Embezzlement and Fraud." Watching Mark's perfectly constructed world collapse was more satisfying than I could have imagined. The criminal charges meant he was immediately fired from his own company. His business partners bought out his share for a fraction of what it was worth to distance themselves from the scandal. His professional license was suspended pending the criminal trial. The FBI froze all his accounts, including the ones he'd been using to support Jessica and their baby. The expensive apartment they shared was in Mark's name, and without his income, they couldn't afford the rent. Jessica, faced with a broke, unemployed, criminally charged boyfriend and a crying baby, suddenly wasn't so interested in their great love story anymore. She moved back in with her parents and stopped taking Mark's calls. The man who'd promised her the world couldn't even afford to buy diapers for their son. But the best part was what happened in our divorce proceedings. With Mark facing criminal charges and his assets frozen, Margaret was able to negotiate an incredible settlement. Mark agreed to give me full custody of Emma and Jake with minimal visitation rights. He signed over his remaining interest in our house, which meant I could sell it and keep all the proceeds. He also agreed to pay substantial alimony and child support once he was employed again, if he ever was. Most importantly, the truth came out. Everyone who'd whispered about me, everyone who'd believed Mark's lies about being the victim, now knew exactly what kind of man he really was. The same people who'd pitied him for having such a crazy, jealous wife were now apologizing to me for doubting my story. Emma and Jake finally understood why I'd made Daddy leave. When they learned about the affair, the lies, and the stealing, they were old enough to realize that I'd been protecting them, not hurting them. "I'm sorry I blamed you, Mommy," Emma told me one night. "Daddy lied to us, too." Mark was sentenced to 4 years in federal prison. He lost everything: his career, his reputation, his family, his freedom. The woman he'd destroyed his marriage for wanted nothing to do with him. His own children barely spoke to him. Meanwhile, I rebuilt my life, stronger than ever. With the settlement money, I was able to expand my business and move into a beautiful new house, bigger and better than the one I'd shared with Mark. Emma and Jake thrived in their new schools and made new friends. Most importantly, I learned that I was stronger than I'd ever imagined. I'd survived the worst betrayal possible and came out victorious. Today, my business is more successful than ever. My children are happy, healthy, and proud of their strong mother. And Mark? Well, let's just say federal prison doesn't have conjugal visits. I never did find out what happened to Jessica and the baby after she left him. But honestly, I stopped caring the day I realized my life was infinitely better without any of them in it. Sometimes life has to completely fall apart before it can come back together better than ever. The worst thing that happened to me turned out to be the best thing that could have happened. I'm no longer Mrs. Mark Williams. I'm just Sarah. And that's exactly who I was meant to be. Sometimes the people we trust most are the ones capable of the deepest betrayal. But surviving that betrayal can make you stronger than you ever thought possible. Have you ever experienced a situation where the worst thing that happened to you turned out to be a blessing in disguise? Share your story in the comments below, and remember, you're stronger than you know.